Welcome to the hard count. Wait, none of you are blonde. What's going on here? Yeah, we're not JD. I'm
Some
Andy
of us
Staples.
are jacked.
Yeah, he's Ari Wasserman. He's jacked, just like JD. But neither of us are blonde. You've probably been following along on JD's socials. So he's got his program shirt on. Ari's got his program shirt, so we're good. JD's about to be a dad. And we are so happy for him. And both of us, some more recently than others, have been through the experience of becoming a dad for the first time. And it's amazing. And we cannot wait to see how good of a dad JD is going to be, because I got a good feeling about it. But we are here. OG Gary asks, are we live or is this pre-recorded? We are very much live, OG Gary.
We're live, bud. We're going to do it live.
Do it live.
Do it live.
Play us out. Oh, Bill O'Reilly. How do you not know these terms? You've been in television for at that point, you've been in television for a decent amount of time. Now you've been in television for a long time, but all right. We got to talk about a lot of stuff because we got big games this weekend. We're going to talk a little Georgia, Tennessee. We got big news. Pete Nakos will be joining us talking transfer portal. Thomas Castellanos from Boston College entering the transfer portal. We just found out yesterday. Oh, we got some late comers. So let's fill everybody in again. Gerald in the chat says, wait, Andy and Ari, where's JD? Remember, JD, blessed event coming. Blessed event, perhaps hours away. So JD will be out for a little while. So we're going to be handling the hard count probably for the next week or so. And I think you're going to enjoy it. If you don't already watch Andy and Ari on 3, we do the morning show. So we're on at 9:30 a.m. Eastern weekday mornings. We also do a post-game show on Saturday nights that is a lot of fun. But right now, we're going hard count. Let's start, Ari, with the thing that came out last night where cynical Andy went, somebody's agent's just doing some work here. And then I thought about it a little more, and I'm like, maybe not. All right, so Jeremy Fowler from ESPN, graduate of West Orange High School in Winter Garden, Florida. He reports last night that some NFL teams might be interested in one Dan Lanning. And my initial thought, Ari, was, oh boy, Jimmy Sexton is getting some work done here because he's scared off all the college teams because Lanning's got like a $20 million buyout if he goes to another college team. And so he's just trying to get some more money, squeeze some more shekels out of Oregon. Is cynical Andy right on this?
Probably. Yeah. I mean, listen, there's been nobody that's been more loyal to their program than Dan Lanning, right? Like last year, if he was ever going to jump ship, there was a pretty nice opportunity potentially waiting for him had he been more interested to go back to the South and try to compete in that fish tank. And he has put a lot of time and effort into building Oregon into the program now that could win a national championship. Now, it's very hard in these scenarios to speak for somebody who, you know, you're not talking to about these things. I don't know that I would feel like I would see a situation where he would be interested in that. So I don't know if that's true or not, but it's definitely savvy. And if it is true, then he's going to get paid more anyway.
He definitely doesn't seem interested in another college job. Either he's the best actor in the world about that, or he's legit. He's real. Like, does not want to go to another college job. But I remember, talking to him about it after year 1 at Oregon, and he very resolute. Like, I'm here. I love it here. My family loves it here. And they all say. But the other thing about Dan Lanning, you got to remember, most of the jobs that he would be up for are back down south. He's not Southern. He's from Kansas. So the going home piece of it, which I know Oregon fans are probably a little have some PTSD because they lost 2 coaches in a row who were Floridians who went back to schools in Florida. But I don't think that's an issue here. The NFL piece of it, the only thing I can think of is coaches want to work at the highest level sometimes. That some guys say, I'm a college coach. That's all I ever want to be. some guys do want to work at the highest level. Dan Lanning, I don't think there's any part of his skill set that says he's a better college coach than an NFL coach. I think he's probably just a good coach. So he'd probably be successful either place. But he does seem pretty happy at Oregon. But I will point out that what makes this unusual, and we'll talk about that. We're going to have Pete Nakos join us at 11:15 Eastern time. We're going to talk coaching carousel. We're going to talk transfer portal. But the coaching carousel thing is interesting. There's a lot of group of 5 jobs that are going to open up this year. But Ari, I don't think there are going to be many power conference jobs open. I think there will be more NFL openings from firings than power conference openings from firings.
Yeah. And you did a good job on our show kind of illustrating the reason for that and how that might trickle down into the coordinator position, right? Like you have these insane buyouts. The collective bargaining seems to be right around the corner. We are in a position where these colleges need as much money as they can in order to prepare for the next frontier of college athletics. And, firing coaches with insanely high buyouts just is not good business. Going back to Dan Lanning, Andy, I do think that, part of the reason why I've always viewed him as somebody who would have been a reasonable or, maybe even a preferred candidate for a place like Alabama or any other Southern job that opens is because he seems to understand better or as well as anybody how to assemble a roster at the college level in order to put Oregon in the position that it is in today. And the thing that you always have to discuss and really dive into, Andy, when talking about jumping from this level to the NFL is that if you have less control over the talent advantage, if you have less control over who you get on your team on a year-to-year basis, at the NFL level, it's based on how good your GM is, how well you guys draft, and the X's and O's aspect of it, I think, is a much higher percentage of your job at the next level than it is in college. Like, I think that getting better players in college is a higher percentage. So when we say Dan Lanning is an amazing coach, when I say that, I love his aggressiveness on fourth down. I think he draws up great plays. Like, I'm not saying that he isn't great at that aspect of it. But what makes Dan Lanning a special college coach who has a $20 million buyout to go somewhere else, the reason is because he knows how to build a team. And that skill is not something that is transferred to the next level. So if I'm a college coach in Dan Lanning's position, a person who probably could stay at Oregon as long as he wants at this point, especially if they go out and win a national title at any point in the next few years, is I would always think from a job security standpoint is like, am I going to stay at Oregon, win national championships or compete for national championships and be at a very advantageous place to build a long-term winner where they'll make a statue of me? Or do I want to go coach the Cleveland Browns, go through another dysfunctional quarterback situation, and then get fired in 4 years? Like,
I think Stefanski's okay. So good news.
Yeah. I mean, hey, listen, was he the longest tenured Browns coach since 2000?
Yeah,
I think.
Well, let me give you a list of the NFL jobs that are either open or we think are going to open, and they're probably going to be more than this, but this is the ones that we can pretty safely say. The Jets and Saints are open. The Bears will open. The Cowboys will open. The Giants probably will open. Which, hey, Brian Dable as your OC in coordinator bingo. Just saying. Jaguars probably will open. Maybe the Raiders if they feel like they got a little hasty with Antonio Pierce. But so that was 6 before I said the Raiders. I actually think there's probably only about 2 in college. But I think what Dan Lanning does travels. He can, you mentioned his roster building is excellent, but I also think the way he motivates people, the quote that was in the Jeremy Fowler story, which I think did probably come from an NFL GM or probably, an owner or something, where he says that they feel like he's got a little Dan Campbell in him. I don't think he's as much fun as Dan Campbell. Like, I don't think I'd bang my head to Metallica with Dan Lanning the way I would with Dan Campbell. But I do think players would enjoy playing for him the way they play for Dan Campbell.
I mean, Dan Lanning does do a few upper deckies out there with the Zen, though. Let's not be 100% certain that this guy doesn't party. So, it would be kind of a fun dynamic. Like, imagine a world where Dan Lanning was coaching Caleb Williams for the Bears next year, like how small the world is sometimes.
Yeah.
But, I think that he has got such a good thing going and it is really, really hard to leave a good thing for an
Yeah.
uncertain thing. So, yeah.
I have a question for you based on what you just said, because we always do these best jobs rankings. We've done them for years, and they always wind up being very controversial shows because people get mad when you say their job isn't the best in the world. But I do think the criteria that we use to rank best jobs has definitely got to change in this era of college football. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that we've done one reflecting the changes.
We should do it.
So where does Oregon fall? Because I'm thinking it is a top 3 job based on how well they've handled player acquisition and how aligned they've been in terms of player acquisition.
Absolutely. And I think that, just to be clear about what you mean, change the criteria for that, proximity to talent was like a top 2 bullet point on what
it was number 1. It was even close. So,
yeah. Obviously I think the resources and investment in the program too, like all these things are all part of it. But if you have a place that has an NIL structure and an administration and a booster situation that's all aligned, I think Dan Lanning has proved through his talent accumulation, both in the high school ranks and the portal, that Oregon can equip a roster as effectively and as efficiently and deeply as some of the teams in the South that they're going to have to beat here in the next few months. So I think that, Oregon would be up there, and I would be interesting because I haven't actually given it that much thought, Andy. I think you should write that down so we can do it on our show.
Yeah.
Because it is like, it used to be like Georgia's number 1 because it's near Atlanta, it's in the South, and it's got all this money, and it's a blue blood. It's like, I don't know if that's changed, right? Like Georgia's probably still number 1. But like when you start getting into, maybe Texas is number 2 because it still matters, being the brand and being close.
And they've been very aligned on this stuff. Like Oregon, I think Tennessee has jumped up because they've been good at that stuff. It's not just that Josh Heupel's been good at coaching them. Their administration, the Spire Collective, like they've done such a good job with all that. You understand now why they are better as a program on the field.
Well, where in the past too, Andy, Tennessee would have been negged because Tennessee is a long, interesting state that's recruited by everybody. There's not a ton of players there in comparison.
Parallelogram.
This is a bad at math, science, and any other high school subject podcast.
I'm good at geography. Speak for yourself.
I suck at geography. I suck at math. I suck at American history. Frankly, I suck at college football. What are we talking about here? I don't even know the college football trivia that
seen your picks.
But seriously, Tennessee is not a place that has talent at the same level as a Florida or a California or a Texas or a Georgia. So,
correct.
And Ohio State and Georgia and all the teams in the general area will go there for their players. But I do think that there is something to it. And like Tennessee's recent run of success with the coach who gets it, also, like, is there a better place to play than a hyped up, Neyland, right? Like these are things that are all coming back into play. So that would be a fun exercise. And I do think that Oregon would jump up higher. I think Tennessee would jump up higher, but it would be an interesting thought exercise to see which ones actually do, or if the top 10 would look eerily similar again. Like, what do you do with Ohio State?
Well, Ohio State's still but is there any scenario in college football where Ohio State isn't one of the best at it? Like, they just always are. But I think Oregon moves into that echelon in terms of a coaching job that would be desirable. And if you're Dan Lanning, you've moved around a ton. And I mean, that's the thing that people understand about Dan Lanning. He's moved from, he was working at a high school in Kansas. He's moved to Pittsburgh. He's moved to Arizona. He's moved to Memphis, to Georgia. Like, he has been all over the country and not stayed anywhere for particularly long. He's got younger kids. You see the pictures he posts of his family. Like, I understand your daughter's very young. Well, this ties into the theme of the show with JD about to become a dad. Like, when your kids get a little bit older, you do want to give them some stability. You don't want to change them schools every year or so, every couple of years. You want them to have a place that feels like home for them. So I get it from his standpoint. And it seems like Oregon's doing everything they can possibly do to make sure he's happy there.
Yeah. And listen, too, we're talking about this with the understanding that if Lanning went to the NFL, that would be a shocker, right? Like that would be something that we didn't anticipate. So, people like Lanning is.
But him doing it wouldn't shock me as much as some other coaches doing it, because I think he could succeed there. It's not like his success is not completely recruiting based. And also, he's kind of operating in a world, because again, Oregon's good at the player acquisition piece of it in the NIL era. He's operating in a world that's similar to the NFL in terms of personnel.
Yeah. And you can't give him crap for not winning big games anymore.
No, they beat Ohio State. And I think he's getting the Washington monkey off his back too. I think that's coming in a couple of weeks. So we'll find out. But I'm fascinated by this coaching carousel. We'll see if anybody goes to the NFL, because I do think there may be some interest in some college guys. And remember, the agents for these guys are going to want to push them toward the NFL, because there's not really anywhere to push them in college with nobody firing anybody this year, which brings us to our guest, the great Pete Nakos. Hopefully you are setting your Nakosifications. So every time Pete tweets news, which he tweeted some very interesting news yesterday, that you're getting it. How you doing, Pete?
What's up, guys? This is the first time I've been with Andy and Ari. I know we're on the hard count right now, but I have not been on with Andy and Ari yet. So what's going on, guys?
Get ready. We're gonna wear your ass out transfer portal season. So it's coming.
Also, too, Pete, just get it straight that this is our show now until JD comes back.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, like
Art is the captain now.
Yeah, look,
you understand?
Program.
All right, so Pete, let's talk about. Well, we can continue this conversation we were having, because I think you and I have had these conversations on the phone a lot over the last few weeks about what head coaching jobs in college may come open, and the answer is not many. So do you think there are coaches in college, other than Dan Lanning, that might be attractive to some of these NFL teams, where they're probably going to be more openings and their agents are going to be pushing them that way?
Deion Sanders. I think that name continues to come up, so I'll just start it there. But if we're going to keep looking at the college landscape, not for a head coaching role, but I think Lincoln Riley's name is going to continue to come up in an offensive coordinator capacity, specifically maybe with a former player who's now in the NFL. Maybe you guys can put together the pieces there. But I think that there's going to be a couple names that pop up, and those are two names. And these are not like I'm not the first one to bring this up, right? Like Jeremy Fowler from ESPN yesterday brought up Dan Lanning. Deion Sanders' name has been brought up recently by quite a few people around the nation. And then, I mean, Lincoln Riley, we all know about his $100 million buyout that, I mean, USC is not going to be able to make a move this year. Maybe they make a move next year. We're not really sure. But 3 years ago, right, Lincoln Riley was like the biggest name in the sport of football. And it seemed like just a matter of time until he got to maybe the NFL. Does he get to the NFL this way, though, through maybe taking a coordinator job? I'm not saying that's imminent or anything, but that's just one name I'm looking at.
You know, the name that just keeps coming up over and over and over again, and this is a podcast, we're having fun, Pete. Let's just talk about it. Do you want to just talk about the Deion stuff, like the Deion Cowboy stuff? Like, Andy, Pete, I recently wrote a column this week about how I was wrong about Deion. Okay. And I think that I've been really impressed with his ability to hire a staff, and, his team is well coached, right? Like, they have had, talent limitations in the past. They've overcome them. This year, those limitations aren't profound anymore, and they're in a position to make the playoff. Do you think that Deion Sanders is a legitimate candidate who is qualified to be the head coach of an NFL franchise?
I think Deion Sanders has shown in the past few years that he's more than capable of leading a group of men and winning football games. And I think that's what really matters in the NFL, and specifically what matters right now with the Dallas Cowboys, because, I mean, they just can't win games right now. And obviously Dak's hurt and a lot's going on in Dallas. And by no means am I the Jerry Jones expert, but I think that Deion Sanders has enough of a track record to show that, hey, if you bring me in, I know how to lead a group of men. I've been in the same shoes they have. I think we can win football games. So that's just my take. I also, Ari, as we talk about this, I wouldn't limit it to Dallas. I know he played there, but I would keep an eye on wherever Shador goes. Just keep an eye on what Dion does.
Woo, daddy ball in the NFL. That's all right. And it's not daddy ball. I'm going to stop calling it daddy ball. So, Pete,
if he does that, it's daddy ball. Okay.
That's true.
It goes back to being daddy ball. Yeah. Like, what are we doing here? At that point, it's definitive.
Yeah, that's true. Hey, Pete, you broke a story yesterday that I want to talk about. Thomas Castellanos. We got off our Tom Brenneman Castellanos jokes because Brenneman did a CW broadcast of a Boston College game. Of course, Thomas Castellanos gets benched in that Syracuse game. Now he's not going to be starting for Boston College. He has now left the team. You reported yesterday he's planning to enter the transfer portal. Pete, why do these guys do this where you got to chill out for 12 more practices? Why not just enter the transfer portal after the season?
Because it drives your price significantly higher and you're the first quarterback on the market, which makes you extremely more attractive than you might be if you go in on the first day of the portal.
This is why we have Pete on. I did not think about it that way.
Well,
but see, to me, it would lower your value because you're saying I'm a quitter. Like I get benched and I'm going to storm off and take my ball home.
You know, from conversations I've had, I know a lot of people on social media want to paint Thomas Castellanos as a quitter. I think it's been trending in this direction. I do not think that this was suddenly something that happened in Syracuse. I think that from talking to some sources, there's an understanding in the building that maybe that Bill O'Brien and Thomas Castellanos were not going to be working to win games on the same team next season. Gotcha. So going off of that, I guess what I'll say is that maybe this is what's best for Thomas and BC and Bill O'Brien, both parties moving forward.
Can we go through the economics of that, though? I'd like to have a actual money discussion of why being first is better.
Well, for starters, Ari, I think that the most simple way I feel like I can break it down is so the portal opens December 9th, right? That's the day after Selection Sunday. There is going to be a rush of guys who go in. And even for the group of 5 quarterback who's really good, who goes in, he is going to be overlooked by the Dylan Gabriels and the Cam Wards, just for example, from last year. So the sooner somebody announces that they're going to enter, the sooner guys start looking at their tape, the sooner that their agents can start doing what agents are supposed to do, the sooner they can take visits. I mean, right, the minute the portal opens now, Thomas Castellanos, people know his name. He could go on a visit that first weekend. There's no when's he going in? Is he going in? So, I mean, I know we're talking about a lot of things right now that involve tampering and involve back channeling before someone goes in the portal, but it's also just the reality we're in when the NCAA isn't exactly coming after guys for transfer portal movement.
One more thing, Pete, before we let you go. So our folks at the Wolverine are reporting that Michigan's recruitment of Bryce Underwood, the number 1 quarterback recruit in the class of 2025, has ramped up. The potential NIL offer has ramped up. And obviously we got our folks at the Bengal Tiger covering it as well because he's been committed to LSU forever. So EJ Holland at the Wolverine floated possibly a 4-year, $10.5 million deal for Bryce Underwood. Does that sound about right given the amount of money that's coming into the market with the revenue share coming?
Yeah, I think you got to look at it through a lot of angles. Obviously, there's rev share, there's the collective money. I reported last month that it was definitely going to be over $5 million. Look, I'll say this. I think when you land Bryce Underwood right now, there's a lot more to that number than it is just he's a generational quarterback who can turn around Michigan football. It's also the momentum he brings. It's also what he's going to mean for the 2025 recruiting class, right? If he does flip, think about the impact that's going to have on wide receivers and skill players across the country. So, I mean, yeah, there's a lot hinging on that recruitment right now for Michigan.
Pete, it's been a pleasure. I cannot wait to see what happens next. And yeah, like I said, we're going to wear your ass out here. Transfer portal season. It's coming up. Thank you, Pete Nakos.
Sounds
Thanks,
good.
Pete.
Thanks, guys.
Turn your Nakosifications on. When that man tweets, things are happening. Ari, $2.25 million a year for a freshman quarterback. Now, DJ Lagway's at 1.7 this year. So inflation has hit us all. The price of groceries going up, price of quarterbacks going up.
Yeah. Those protein shakes are getting more expensive, Andy. So if you want a quarterback who's got big muscles and, the coaching and all that stuff, it's more expensive. He's got to have better ROI on that. It's going to be more and more expensive every year. How long will it be before guys are getting paid, $5 million a year, $6 million a year? I mean, I don't know if that's impossible. Like, we might be getting to that point one day.
I think the market's going to determine it. And that's what's been weird to watch about there. Well, weird, but fascinating to watch about this is the market just sort of finding its level very quickly. And it's going to, but it's going to change. And I don't know about you. I mentioned on our show that I spoke to a touchdown club in Orlando the other night. Really great people, very tapped into college football, fans of a bunch of different schools, and, big fans. But I'm not sure, like I brought up the revenue sharing thing to them. A lot of them either didn't know about it or didn't quite understand what was going to happen. Like, I think you got to understand, there's only about 5 schools right now that have a budget of more than $15 million a year for players. Every power conference school is going to have something like that next year. Every one. So it's going to go from 5 out of 60 something to all of them. That's a lot of money to flush into the system.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. That's crazy. Yeah. That's all really interesting. Ooh. Maybe I should start training my. Yeah, I was going to say, maybe I should start training my daughter to be a quarterback.
You need to put a basketball in her hands.
Yeah, she's really into gymnastics right now. So we'll see about if that's where she gravitates to. But I also found out that gymnastics is the most expensive sport that a little girl can do. So I'm assuming that's what she's going to choose.
Well, just imagine when she becomes the next Livy Dunn and pays it all back to you.
I hope that happens for her. I do. And she can keep the money.
I was going to say, given the height projection for yours, I think gymnastics may be the way to go over basketball. So,
what's interesting that you just said that is that I was talking to my brother this morning about the gymnastics. We have a gymnastics class on Friday nights that we go to for her, and she's 3, so it's not advanced stuff. But my brother said, it's a shame, but with our family lineage, she's probably never going to have the athleticism necessary to compete for the Olympics. And I was like, all right, listen, buddy, we're not thinking about the Olympics right now. She's 3. We're not the goal,
NIL, baby.
But now that you mention it, it's we're not trying to become Simone Biles. Simone Biles was put on this earth to be a gymnast. She is one of the most incredible athletes ever. And I think a lot of that has to do with natural traits that she's been blessed with. But if she could be Livy Dunn, her name's Liv.
It's very difficult to be Livy Dunn.
It is.
You still have to be very talented.
But I don't know. Is Livy Dunn good at gymnastics enough where she would be in the thought of making the Olympics?
No,
she's
already too old. You would have already been in that. Suni Lee, who competed at Auburn, had already won an all-around gold medal in the Olympics.
Okay, so you know by the time you're 14 if you're doing it or not.
Yeah, they know even before high school, high school, they know.
But how much worse is Livy Dunn at gymnastics than the worst person on the U.S. Olympic team? Is it being an NFL quarterback and a high school senior, or is it no, I don't know what the gap is.
It's probably like being an NFL quarterback and being a good college quarterback who isn't going to be an NFL quarterback.
Got it.
So you're still very good. You're still better than almost everybody on the planet, but you're not the world class. So yeah, it's a tough one. Ari, we mentioned Coach Prime and we mentioned his future. And I think you and we've come around on Coach Prime as far as roster building, as far as what he wants to do at Colorado. Very interesting development on the recruiting side. So he's got a visitor coming this week that is one that I think when we were talking earlier, we were saying, he's just not recruiting the high school guys enough. You can't do this all out of the portal. If you want good big guys, you gotta get him out of high school. And he did sign Jordan Seaton last year, but it seems like he's doing that again. He's working on that again. So Michael Carroll, who's the #1 interior offensive line prospect in the country, he's 14 overall in the country in the On3 industry rankings. I believe we at On3 have him #9 overall in the country. So he's at IMG Academy right now. He's from Pennsylvania originally. He's an Alabama commit. He's headed to Colorado for the Utah game. Can we show the video that he posted recently of himself blocking?
Oh my gosh. Michael.
I think that's his mom.
Like, leave him alone.
Reacting to him just throwing a fairly large defensive tackle like a rag doll, and his helmet, the guy's helmet flying off. Let's show that again. One more time.
Oh my gosh. Michael.
So this is the guy who's going to go to Alabama, or at least we think, but he's going to Colorado for a visit. Ari, if Deion's getting dudes like this, and if he's flipping Julian Lewis, oh my God, Michael.
There are some places in college football that you could probably, and maybe this list is lower now in this new era, that you could say their ceiling is not national title, right?
Right.
If Deion really got it cooking and was there for a long time and recruited 10 athletes a year, I know he went on a long rant.
Like this, yeah.
Yes. He went on a long explanation in his news conference, I believe on Wednesday, about portal versus high school football recruiting and wanting people to play right away, and how if you sign 25 guys, you're probably going to lose half, and like what the math is on actually doing well in high school recruiting. But if he could sign 10 top 150 to top 200 players a year, guys like that, guys like Juju Lewis, I think it is like the ceiling for Colorado's program is probably winning a national title in this era, right? Like, can you say that he could, like, if things went well, he stayed bought in, he stayed there for a long time, like by year 7 or year 6 or even year 5, if like things really came together in an advantageous way, that Colorado could have that?
I think you do that for 2 years, 3 years out of high school, because you guys, some guys will still have to develop. But if you did that for 3 years, you would have easily the best roster in the Big 12. Wouldn't even be close. And you could compete, like, especially because some of those players would develop into first-round draft prospect type players that would then be attractive to portal players to come play with. I think by year 3 of that, you're a national title contender.
Because like you're already probably going to make the playoff now. Add in 10 of those for 3 years.
Oh, hey, one more Michael Carroll video. He posted this. This is Michael Carroll running routes at his high school just for fun.
One concussion, Mike.
Oh, he's gone.
That's a 315-pound guard.
Yeah, the thing that people don't appreciate enough is when you start getting SEC linemen at places like Bama and Georgia and like that are ranked like this, that they are even bigger freaks physically than the receivers and the quarterbacks and the skill position.
Not even close.
Yeah.
It's not even close. Yeah, they are like the speed at which these 300-pound guys can move and the agility that they have is obscene. Like it's not normal. It's what makes those great rosters, like the Georgia rosters, the Ohio State rosters, the Bama rosters, even better.
Absolutely. And it's like, who was the lineman from Bama that did that box jump that was like 7 feet tall? Like that was. That
he also played at IMG, and I'm blanking on the name.
He's a very famous person. His name is escaping.
He was a first-round draft pick.
Yeah.
Why am I struggling with this name? This is so bad, and I'm so sorry.
Evan Neal.
Yes. And he did the box jump. There was a split that he did, and so I actually saw Evan Neal play in high school when he was at spring practice at IMG, because I was down there to do a story on Daniel Fa'alele. You remember Daniel Fa'alele who played at Minnesota? So Daniel came from Australia. He had 50 offers before he'd ever even played an actual football game. He was 6'9", 400 pounds. He currently starts at guard for the Ravens. But Evan Neal was there, and Daniel at that time, is still learning the sport. But then you go watch Evan Neal play, and then he's going into his senior year, and you're like, oh my God, this person's in high school? He looked like an NFL offensive lineman already.
Yeah. And like what they're able to do, size, speed, strength, I think trumps the acrobatic one-handed touchdown catches that you see on SportsCenter.
Yeah. Now, it'd be like, imagine if Jeremiah Smith was 300 pounds, basically. Puff Dutch asks us, who wins Utah, Colorado? Well, Utah is an 11.5-point dog, and the quarterback who gave them a spark last week against BYU is out for the year again with injury. So Isaac Wilson will be starting for Utah. Colorado is playing better than anybody in the Big 12. This is Ari, it's an unusual spread for a Big 12 game this year. Like Colorado minus 11.5. You haven't seen a lot of double-digit spreads in Big 12 conference games.
Yeah. And now the one hope that Utah had in this game isn't playing. So, and also, too, it's a testament to where Colorado has come. If this game was being played 2 months ago, the spread would not be 11.5. It's about where they've been and where they are, and there is a dramatic difference between the Colorado that we saw 2 months ago and the Colorado that exists today. So, I mean, and like also, too, this spread, I believe, opened below 10. So I think it was like 8.5 or 9 where it opened. And now it's moved to 11.5. And that's a pretty significant move because it goes from a touchdown and a field goal scenario to a 2-touchdown spread. It's the key numbers that are really important as much as even the total number of points that it moves. So, yeah, I think that's warranted. And I like Colorado in the game to cover.
Yeah, I do too. They've played better, more consistently than anybody in the Big 12 the last few weeks. Now, BYU still undefeated, but you and I think both think Kansas is going to beat BYU this weekend because BYU has just been living dangerously the entire time. I
think Kansas is going to clip somebody. And I don't know.
Well, they did. They got Iowa State last week.
No, I know. I think that, but do they have Colorado too, right? Like they have between Colorado and this weekend against BYU. I think they go 1-1 in those. So hopefully they get it for Colorado's sake this weekend, so that Colorado can continue on into the Big 12 championship.
Yeah, it feels like Jalen Daniels and Devin Neal and Jeff Grimes, their first year offensive coordinator at Kansas, they've kind of figured things out and they've moved into that mode where they're going to hang. There's a good chance they can hang 40 on you any given week now. And so that, I think, against BYU, that's a problem. Against Colorado can probably hang in a shootout like that. They might not win it, but they can definitely. I feel like Colorado is better prepared to hang in that sort of shootout.
Yep. I'm with you.
All right. So let us see what happens there. We also have to see what happens with SMU. Now, remember, we talked about the Thomas Castellanos thing. So he's not playing for BC. They're changing quarterbacks going into this SMU game. SMU trying to stay undefeated in the ACC. But SMU coach Rhett Lashlee came out this week and said, hey, there's a brand bias against the ACC. Let's watch that clip.
On behalf of the ACC, I think it is interesting. Yeah, there's normal brand biases for teams. I'm not really going to get into that, but there's conference biases. And I think it's interesting that, you look at the ACC, we have a winning record against the Big Ten this year. We have a winning record against the Big 12 this year. We don't have a winning record against the SEC, but we have 4 games left, and if we win enough of those, we would have a winning record. So that's still up in the air. It's been competitive. And, so to look at our league and say, well, we may be a one-bid league, but you look at another league that we have a winning record against and say, oh, they're going to get 4 in. Like, it doesn't make sense to me. It needs to make it make sense. When other leagues beat each other up internally, they're considered a deep, solid league. When we beat up internally, we're considered a weak league. When Kentucky goes and beats Ole Miss, when Arkansas goes and beats Tennessee, when South Carolina goes and beats A&M, when Vandy beats Alabama, that's considered a deep league. When Georgia Tech beats Miami, right? When Louisville goes on the road and beats Clemson, when UVA goes on the road and beats Pitt, we're not considered a deep league. I think we're a pretty deep league. And so I just want our league to get the same respect that everyone else gets. And, you know, I think we have at least 2, probably 3 or 4 teams still that should be very well considered for the college football playoff in this league. And it shouldn't be any different than the Big 10 or the Big 12. Same thing, Big 12, if I'm them, I'm upset too. I'm like, hold on, we got an make it make sense. And when the data and the metrics say it should, I think that's the biggest thing. I think our league has earned the right to be in the conversation. It's insulting to say, oh, it's a one big league probably, maybe 2, yet we've got another league that the metrics don't add up any better. As a matter of fact, worse, and we're acting like they just are got 4 and it's done. Make it make sense.
I got a lot of thoughts here, Andy. Do you want to hear them or do you want to go first?
I just want to say one thing, and I'm going to let you cook.
That's what I was going to say. So that comment we put up.
Rhett Lashlee's been in the ACC for like 3 months. He's already better at PR and presenting the ACC's case than the ACC has been for the last 10 years.
That's not what I was going to say.
But go ahead.
I was going to say that it's amusing to me that SMU has been dying for years and years and years to get into a Power 5, Power 4, Power Conference. And in year 1 of his existence, they're finding out right now that like SMU would probably have every bit as much of an opportunity to make the playoff now as they would last year. If the 12-team field existed last year, because if SMU was beating the crap out of teams, they might not have. They would have still had their non-conference game against BYU, so they still might have a loss, but they would be right next to Boise in their race, right, to be the 12 seed. So it is funny, but the only difference between being in the conference that he's in now and being a group of 5 is that he can definitively say that SMU controls their own destiny. Like, he has full power to get there. Now, the thing that I wrote, and I think he has a point, and he said this after I wrote this column for On 3 on what's today? Thursday? On Wednesday, is that it doesn't make sense, the inconsistency in which 2 teams in the same conference are ranked. Like, it does not make sense to me that Miami is 9 and SMU is 14 when you stack the resumes side by side. Same league, same best win. The strength of schedules are fairly similar, and SMU has a loss to a better team, a better loss. Like, losing to BYU is a better loss than losing to Georgia Tech. And Georgia Tech's a much different team now with Haynes King, but still, I think it's a better, more quality loss, especially if we're using the committee's rankings that they put together themselves. They will tell you, because they have ranked it this way, that losing to BYU, who's a top 10 team, is a better loss than losing to Georgia Tech. It's not a debate. And you have one team that's firmly in the playoff right now, and you have one team that's out of it if the season ended today. Now, SMU is lucky because it doesn't matter. SMU could be ranked 100th or they could be ranked number 1. Their path to the field is the same regardless of their ranking. But it does not. The thing that bothers me the most about the College Football Playoff Committee is that they use protocol for some and they rank on feeling for others. And if you want to just rank the teams 1 through 12 based on who you think is the best team, based on your feeling and your ability to watch the games and come up with it, then you have to rank everybody that way. But the thing that frustrates me, Andy, is that some people who have the protocol and the quality wins and the things that they can use to weaponize their ranking or to explain the ranking are ranked based on their accomplishments. And then other teams are just ranked based on feeling in the same poll, and then it becomes inconsistent. And that's why my mind explodes. So, like, Miami is ahead 5 spots of SMU in the poll right now because the committee feels like they're better.
Right. Because
but I have
reasons.
a buddy.
Right.
Yeah. And like, if Ward Manuel's explanation for this was reasons, it was feeling. We felt. So then don't fall back on the protocol for other teams if that's your explanation for why they're ranked where they are. Why did you rank SMU and Miami differently than you ranked other teams that have better metrics? It doesn't make any sense to me. So, like, that to me is the number one thing. It's the inconsistency of how the rankings are done. And I guess the bottom line is they're just going to do whatever they want, and then they'll explain it away however they see fit. But it just doesn't make sense.
No, I'm with you. I understand that. And There was
Because
an
Andy,
interesting...
Andy, sorry, just let me just do this one last thing.
Okay, go ahead. Keep cooking, man. Keep cooking.
Miami fell less in the polls after a loss to Georgia Tech than Georgia fell in the polls after losing. So, like
I'm glad you brought this up.
So when you're talking about brand bias, like the actual committee's actions have been unfavorable to SMU, but Miami was treated very favorably. So is it actually an ACC issue, or is SMU's brand the problem?
Because I don't even think it's SMU. Is that because Georgia's brand, we can all agree, is stronger than SMU's brand, but they so you just brought up Miami and Georgia. So I had a question in my mailbag column from Sean in Dallas, and it was a great question. He said in the first CFP rankings, the committee had Georgia ranked one spot ahead of Miami. Then both teams lost a game, Georgia to a ranked opponent and Miami to an unranked opponent. Georgia was on the road. Miami was also on the road. Now they have Miami ranked 3 spots ahead of Georgia. What am I missing? Well, somebody did ask Ward Manuel about that on Tuesday night in the conference call. Shall I do a dramatic reading of his answer? Are you ready?
Yes, but I think I have an explanation for it. But go ahead.
Oh, this is let's hear the answer first. Let's hear it from the guy himself. Well, the obvious is the first loss for Miami and the second loss for Georgia. That obviously played a factor into it. Georgia Tech is coming on. They now have both their quarterbacks playing the game. They were on the road. Georgia's losses were both on the road as well. So it came down to factoring in those games. A close game that Miami lost to Georgia Tech, and then a decisive win by Ole Miss against Georgia away. So we just factored everything in and took a look at the competitiveness. Both teams are very good from our perspective, but based on the season as well as how they did last week, that's how we made a judgment of how they fell. Georgia, obviously, with 2 losses, having lost both to Alabama and Ole Miss, both with 2 losses, they obviously, in the mind of the committee, Alabama and Ole Miss were going to be ahead of Georgia because of the head-to-head and the similar record. Did that answer anything?
Well, that's the thing. I actually wrote a column for The Athletic 5 years ago. And you know what I thought? And the premise of the column was this, is that Ward Manuel has a very difficult job. So, I do not love piling on the committee chair who has to speak for an entire room of people on decisions that he himself may not agree with. It's a very difficult situation.
We don't know how Ward Manuel actually thinks about this. And there's probably part of the committee that was like, no, we can't actually put Georgia below Miami. But then another part's like, no, we need to.
Yeah, and I don't know what it would be like because of my temperament, but there's no way that I would effectively be able to argue something I don't believe. That would be hard for me. So I do know that when you get on TV or you get on a conference call with very smart reporters who have all the numbers and the math in front of them, who are asking you questions designed to trip you up, that you the only thing that you can do is be vague and to say whatever gets you to the next question. So I have a great appreciation for the situation that Ward Manuel is in. That said, this is also part of the job. And I do not understand why we have to live in a world where there is no transparency of what is actually taking place. Why can't Ward Manuel say, well, actually half the room had no idea what to do with Miami and Georgia. We had to make I
would love that.
And honestly speaking, we really need more context in the next few weeks to help us navigate that. I would be able to accept that because that's what we're all doing anyway, right? We're all looking for more games, more results, more context. That's the thing. You might not know right now. We don't know if Indiana's going to play with Ohio State. Indiana might beat Ohio State, but we'll know more when they get to play. So what's wrong with saying, I don't know, or we were conflicted, or this was a point of contention? There's no transparency in what we're given as reporters to questions of things that don't make sense are nonsensical answers that are supposed to explain something when in fact it just makes it more nonsensical. We understand how the sport works, Andy. We know that there are certain things that are happening in college football right now in the rankings that are just impossible to navigate. It's hard. I do the rankings every Saturday myself. It's very difficult. And there's no way that you can do a set of rankings without screwing somebody or making a wrong move or irritating somebody. That's part of it. But just be a human. They'll talk to me like you're the BCS machine incarnated into a human.
I'm with you. I want to go back to what Rhett Lashlee said, and I want to ask you. It's kind of a devil's advocate question because I do tend to agree with Rhett Lashlee on this. But does it hurt the ACC at all that SMU can come from the American and dog walk the entire conference?
Yeah, he probably doesn't want to say that because then it just like nags his own team. But like we have to have the reality of that, right? Which is you have a team that is not even taking the entire financial windfall that comes with joining the conference. In fact, they're paying, who is supposed to be a tier lower. And like the actual truth is, this isn't just happening in the ACC. You've got new teams in the Big 12 that are doing the same thing, right? Like,
yeah, but the difference is that the teams that came from the Pac-12 to the Big 12 were in a fairly similar revenue situation, like fairly similar competitive situation. In fact, probably more competitive because they had Oregon and Washington and USC. Like that, they're not moving up or down a level of they're not really moving a level of competition. They're kind of moving over.
Who's in first place?
SMU's moving up.
Who's in the first place in the Big 12?
Colorado.
BYU's in first.
BYU. I'm sorry. Yes, they were moving up. You're right. Okay,
yes.
You're right.
Yeah. So,
right.
Like I agree. Like Colorado to the Big 12 from the Pac-12 is not the same thing as ACC team moving or an American team moving to the ACC. Like I understand that point, but the point is that our perception has always been that the lower level teams can't, like, remember what the number one argument, Andy, was always for the lower level teams, like in the 14 field and the BCS, it was that, well, yeah, they could on any given day beat one of them, but they can't do it playing them week in and week out.
Right? That was of a power conference schedule.
They can't do that. And it's like to watch them come in and it's a different era. It's a different era, but like, yeah, I mean, SMU this isn't a fluke. They're better than the teams they're beating. So, but like, that's the thing. Like Rhett Lashlee has to also acknowledge the world that we live in because he roped the Big 12 into it too. But the Big 12 lost the two anchors of their conference that propped it up in national contention. With Texas and Oklahoma, and when they're good, especially, they either win the conference and are taken seriously at a national level, or the team that wins the conference beats those teams along the way to win it. And that automatically legitimizes your school or your conference if you're able to win that on the way. But the ACC is probably in a better scenario than the Big 12 because the ACC still has Miami, Clemson, and teams that have that brand. But like the Big 12, I don't feel bad for. They don't have anybody left to. I mean, the only way to do this is to win your games, and the Big 12 is playing out exactly the way that we knew it would, which is 3 or 8 teams within 2 losses of each other.
Yeah, and if it's one bid league, it's one bid league. At least you get one in.
But do you think the ACC
playoff? You begin 0.
Do you think the ACC should be a 2-bid league?
Right now, no.
Also, if Clemson beat Georgia or played them to 3 points, then maybe it wouldn't be.
Correct. And as Rhett Lashlee says, there are some games left over where the ACC could take the lead on the season series on the SEC, but do we think that's going to happen? Well, I mean, maybe Georgia Tech could beat Georgia. Florida State, I wouldn't put a lot of faith in, even though Florida's not that good. Louisville's got to prove it can beat Kentucky. I need to see that.
And tinfoil hat, guys. Let's put it on real quick. Put it on with me. And I've been thinking about this, but SMU wins the rest of their regular season games. They go to the ACC championship game, and they lose to Miami by 3.
Yep.
So a good game where either team could have won, which then gives them their second loss, and both of their losses would be to conference champions, and their win over Louisville presumably would be a top 20 win at the end of the year. What if they're compared directly with Indiana, who's a 1-loss team with no quality wins? Like, are we 100% sure that the ACC is a 1-big league right now? Would you bet your life on that right now? Because I wouldn't.
Absolutely would not.
So like, yeah, like I understand what he's saying, but the Big Ten, like Indiana hasn't been given any favors either. So like we are brand problem, but I don't know if it's a conference problem.
Yeah.
Just you can take the hat off now, but that's just what I'm thinking.
No, I think you're probably right. And I don't think we know. I don't think we can make any definitive statements right now, but we'll we will get more context, and Ward Manuel is going to have to answer questions in the next few weeks. But the fact of the matter is, only one of those rankings will count. Another game that is going to affect those rankings quite a bit, happening in Athens this weekend, Tennessee and Georgia. So the availability report in the SEC came out last night. Nico Iamaleava, questionable for Tennessee. Josh Heupel went on his coach's show, said Nico was with them at practice. I think we probably see the path that Nico's playing here. I realize what Chris Felica said earlier in the week, that there was a thought he wouldn't play. I don't think Tennessee's thinking that way. I think they are acting as if he's playing.
Yeah, and the hope is that he will, because this is a pivotal, monumental game in the SEC and in the playoff picture. And who wants to watch a game where a team? And the last thing I want to do, Andy, selfishly, I don't want to have a discussion next week about what if Tennessee loses without him. Like, what does this mean if you don't have your quarter? Like, I hate that shit. Let's just let's just talk about full strength teams playing each other, high level football, and the winner and loser actually has merit. So that's what I'm hoping for.
Yeah, and I think this is going to be a fun game. I think it'll be a low scoring game. We went on our show and went over the defensive stats. Like, Dylan Sampson's been really consistent. He's almost always going over 100 yards. He's now going to play against a defense that gives up 3.3 yards a carry. It's really hard to run the ball on Georgia. But you know who it's harder to run the ball on? Tennessee. And Georgia's not been particularly great at running the ball this year anyway, compared to what they usually are. So I really think, I think with Nico, if he has that game where he's connecting with his receivers on the deep ball, like, because remember, he was airmailing them at first, then they were dropping it. There's going to be a game at some point where they're actually in sync. And that's going to be a very tough deal for the defense. I don't think this is that game, but what if it was?
I hope it is. Yeah. I mean, I hope we get the Kirby Smart sweltering, suffocating defense versus the Tennessee offense that knows how to hit a player downfield. Because, like, listen, we were both at the Ole Miss game last week. People didn't have a hard time getting open. Now, I understand that Ole Miss's receivers are probably a lot better, but Trey Harris wasn't on the field either. Wait, you can get open against this defense. So, yeah.
And the other piece of this, because I keep seeing comparisons to the 2022 game where a lot of us said that we thought Tennessee would beat Georgia. Hand up, I said that. I was very wrong. Tennessee's defense is a very different animal this year, and Georgia's offense is a very different animal this year in different ways. Tennessee's defense is a lot better than the 2022 Tennessee defense. Georgia's offense is probably significantly worse than the 2022 Georgia offense. So, like, Georgia's defense is going to have to make up the difference in this game. Now, Ari, we've seen Georgia's defense do that against a good opponent. We saw them do it against Texas, where Georgia's defense won that game for the Bulldogs, and they won it comfortably. So it's not like this is impossible, but that's where it's going to have to come from.
Yeah, absolutely. Cannot wait to watch this game. It's going to be electric.
Oh, it's that, like, we got what we wanted out of Georgia Ole Miss. We didn't really out of Alabama LSU, but I feel like Georgia Tennessee is going to give us everything we want.
Yeah, and it's going to be a night game, and we're going to go right into our show from it. It's going to be awesome.
What other game are you super excited for this week?
Oh, man. Let me pull up the schedule.
Colorado, Utah for me, because I love the big noon. Like, Colorado's like, we're not complaining. We don't care. We want the showcase. We'll start at 10 a.m. local. Let's go. Like, what rapper leads them out of the tunnel this week?
Yeah, I'm very obviously this is the game of the week. I actually don't think that this is a very deep week on paper as it pertains to top 25 big time matchups. But you know which game I'm actually really looking forward to watching, Andy? And it sucks that it starts so late, but Kansas BYU.
Yes.
Like, I'm really looking forward to that game. So
we'll be broadcasting live during that game, by the way. And so, in case you're wondering who the hell these two people are, I'm Andy Staples. He's Ari Wasserman. We also work it on 3 with JD. We love JD. Cannot wait to hear about the blessed event, which is happening sometime soon. You're going to be with it. We'll be with you guys on the hard count for a little bit while JD deals with being a dad for the first time. And it's going to be
Congratulations, Katie. It's the best thing in the world.
Yes,
Yep.
a early congratulations. We love you. Take good care of that little girl, and
Program.